Hey everyone, Jeremy, National Fire Radio. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, a very, very special guest, Chief Scott Thompson out of the Colony, Texas. Chief, thanks for joining me, man.
Jeremy, thanks for having me on. Been looking forward to this, man. Let's have a good time.
This is long overdue. I was just saying to you, every time we hop on, you start talking with a guest, and we have this like pre-show thing, and then we start doing the sauce right there. And I go, wait a minute, let's just hit record every single time.
Let's do it.
That's it. So a little bit about this format. It's super organic. Like I said to you before I hit record, I have no idea where this conversation's going tonight, but I enjoy that because I get to learn along with our listeners as we go. And I know a lot of people are already familiar with Chief Scott Thompson. You are a strong voice in the fire service, which I appreciate. I think we need more of that. I think we need chiefs and leaders and administrators and command staffs and commissioners on down that will take a stand for what they believe in and not have to mute their message because they're worried about any pushback or ideas that come at them from left field where they're willing to throw jabs, but they won't go 2 rounds. And that, to me, is frustrating, right?
Because, I love how you put that. You're exactly right. Yeah.
That's it, though, right? Because everybody's willing to throw a shot. They don't like your message. It comes across hard. Like you were talking in your FDIC keynote. And you go, hey, I might be coming across, some of you sitting in this crowd might think I'm coming across being a little careless or it was about firefighter safety and not looking out for our own. But that's so far from the truth. In fact, my message doubles down on the protection of our own. And the problem is like people will throw shots. They have preconceived ideas or an ideology about how they want to proceed or progress. And then there's a guy like you that's like, hold up a minute. Let's have real conversation. I was on your website before, and something that stood out to me, Chief, was this is a blue-collar job, period.
Yeah. You know, and people even disagree with that, Jeremy. You know,
it's wild.
I was at a conference not long ago, and I was doing the keynote, and a very respected guy from FDNY got up right after me. He says, I don't agree. He says, we need to make this more white-collar. And I just, you know, I like the blue-collar aspect of this job. I think education is important, but this is always going to be manual, dirty labor.
Yeah. Now,
we can be smart. We can be skilled. We know some of the best in the business. But there's always going to be a manual labor component of this, and I like to capitalize on that. I think that's where the mindset's got to start.
Something I heard you say, which really resonated with what you're talking about right now, is as you progress in your fire service career and you start to climb that ladder where you now have a seat at the table as a company officer and then as a chief and then maybe as a training chief or a chief of department, you need to refocus your attention on maybe some more white-collar activities or influence. However, this job will never not be blue-collar. We need people to have mechanical aptitude, to understand where they fit in, how to take initiative, how to size up a situation. These are all things that come from nothing more than experience, information, and knowledge.
You're right. You know, and that is very true. And if you think about it, Jeremy, if you look at the progression of fire chiefs, in the early 80s and prior to, fire chiefs were operators. They knew how to start the brush truck. They knew all the you know, they knew how to pump a rig. They knew all that stuff. And then when we got this professional city manager training track, they wanted more professional fire chiefs. And I've heard city managers say, I don't care if you know anything about firefighting. I want you to be a strategic planner, budget, and you know, and for a while, from the mid '80s to the early '90s, that's what we had. We had fire chiefs, and they were great managers and administrators, but they knew nothing about what the men and women on the rigs were doing. And so you got to have a blend of both. You know, I'm not the best at stretching a line. I'm not the best at forcing a door, but I understand the effort and the skill it takes to do that. And hopefully with that, I know what the men and women in my organization need to be successful. So you got to have some kind of understanding of what the people that are going out there fulfilling, that's just my belief, going out fulfilling the mission every day.
Well, I want to pile on top of that, right? Because, you know, in the smaller world, I talk a lot about the fire service in general, and I get so annoyed how we paint the fire service with a broad stroke. Whereas we have fire companies in this country that have dirt floors and it's truly neighbors helping neighbors. And we go to the most sophisticated and well put together and well funded municipal departments of the biggest cities, right? And then we have everything in between. But what you're talking about still exists today in the smaller departments. The fire chief typically is the guy that has the pump information, the knowledge, the experience, and that's how he disseminates it down through the ranks. And so the small town USA, I think, still very much holds on to those principles.
Which is a majority of the American Fire Service.
Correct.
And I'm willing to bet, and I don't know them all, but I'm willing to bet in those organizations that separation between admin and operations doesn't exist. That they're one. Where the more progressive and the bigger the organization gets, there seems to be this divide between administration and operations, and out of that there's this perception of mistrust. That's another thing that I don't understand. But
so to me, then that screams disconnect, right? Which is a big problem in the fire service today. Chief Rhodes this past year at FDIC spoke to that disconnect. He spoke to poor leadership, and that is a big problem within our fire department today, right? In the fire service. And I firmly believe that. I think we have to do a better job. I think we're losing our own people because of not so much the fire service. People are not prioritizing the fire service anymore because they're getting frustrated and pushed or burnt out from the fire service.
Yeah, no, I agree. And leadership is a huge part of that. Leadership contributes to that. And, when I talk about culture, I talk about 5 things that I call cultural sparks, and the number one is leadership.
Yes.
And you probably know, just like I do, these organizations that used to be places where everybody wanted to work, and then nobody wanted to work for them, and the only thing that changed was the boss. So you got to say that's a huge influence.
And I look at all the travel I do, just like you, right? All this travel we get to do, we get to look under the hood, right? We go to all these different fire departments. We go to conferences. I get to sit at kitchen tables all over the country. I get to ride with some of the biggest and best departments in the country, volunteer, career, you name it. I get to see what's going on, right? Some of the inner workings. And there are high test, man. Growing up, high test was the gas, right? Do you remember that?
High test, right?
Okay.
So no go high test or whatever.
That just popped into my head. But I think about these winning fire companies. I know the Colony through what you talk about and how you package up what the department does and how it really is from the top down, but also the bottom up. This is a working group. The Colony is a successful fire department with an incredible retention rate. We have fire companies like that all over the country. The problem is they're not the focus. We always talk about the bad and never the good, and we need to start focusing on the good because those winning fire companies have the right recipe.
You're exactly right. And I did exactly what you're talking about, Jeremy. Starting in about 1986, for once or twice a year, I'd find what I call a high-performing fire company somewhere in this country. Sometimes I look at Firehouse magazine and see who the busiest hazmat or ridden with the rescues in New York. I've read
the run surveys. I remember that. Yeah.
I would go to these companies that had these great reputations and go spend a week or 10 days with them and just kind of observe what was going on, trying to figure out what made them a little better than everybody else, what made them special ops, what made them the go-to company. And you're right. And, I define that as a microculture there, the fire company, the firehouse microculture. And there's a lot to learn there. That's where success comes from, and that's where it's going to have the greatest impact.
I also think, though, too, Chief, and I'd love your take on this also, right, is I also think sometimes leadership is the scapegoat for lack of work. Us in the trenches, right, we have to put in the work. We also have to realize that in the world in which we live today, nothing is perfect. And nothing gets packaged perfectly. And sometimes we have to pull up our big boy pants and realize that, okay, it's still not that bad. And yet it's easy to gripe, easy to complain, and it's certainly easy to point the finger because we don't want to blame ourselves. We want to blame someone else.
And, it's funny you say that because I've been thinking about that, Jeremy, is towards the end of my programs. My most popular program is a functional fire company. Yes. And it's all about the fire company group, right? That small 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 member team. But you're right. The fire chief or administration a lot of times becomes a scapegoat for a variety of things. And I can tell you, I have tried since day one in the Colony Fire Department to really build that two-way trust between operations and administration. And I can tell you without batting an eye, every morning we start out with our leadership team. How can we help the men and women of this organization? But still, there's 8 or 9 guys that if I die tonight, they'll have a party tomorrow. No matter what I do.
Of course.
And they don't want to be held accountable. They don't like any authority in their life. They got a better way of doing it. It's the personal agendas which really ruin the fire service. These mouths that have a personal agenda, that they don't care about the organization, they don't care about the team, they just care about them, and that spoils a lot of stuff.
Well, that's a strong message coming from you, because I feel very much the same way. I think that those are the individuals. In my program, I talk about winners, winners, average, and losers, and the winners and losers are the smallest group. We have the average in the middle, and the average can come up very easily if we have a winning environment, because the average look at the winners and say, "Whoa, they're doing really well there. We want to come up." But
Right.
it's so much easier to go down, and when we give the losers a voice. And the losers, for me, are the people that are in it for themselves. Those
That's right.
personal agendas that do nothing to promote any agenda of the fire company. They're there for themselves and their own reasons, their own selfish reasons. And with that, when they have a voice within your organization, the average will come down.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. That's their comfort area. So they intentionally try to bring people down, They don't want being a firefighter to be cool. They want to take all that esprit de corps out of the firehouse. And I've been a chief in a couple of organizations, and I can tell you this: the ones with the personal agendas are always the first one in my office. Hey chief, welcome. Can I have a minute with you?
Yeah, right.
And they want you to hear their sourness before you get with it, because the squared away guys, they're doing good things. They're going to keep doing it, but it's always those ones, and every organization has them. I would like to believe that there's an organization out there without them, but there's not. We're always going to have them.
Yeah, and what I find is, to go back to those winning fire companies, right, is that a lot of winning organizations, that when you push your standards to a point where winners win, right, and you allow, as the chief and your command staff, and then your admin side, when you allow your winners to win, and the average can come up, the losers fade away. I always talk about, like, you look at a bigger city department, you always have that one company where you're like, we'll stage them outside the block, right? Because all those guys filter to that firehouse, because that fire company, Engine 12 on the west side, they're known for being slackers, right?
Yep.
And so that's what happens a lot in the fire service, is the losers will find themselves, and then they go off and they have their own little kingdom. And so it's not tolerated in the winning companies, and that's informally not tolerated, because they just don't put the work in or want to meet that agenda
Right.
of a winning culture.
No, you're right, but as a fire chief, that becomes problematic.
For
And
sure.
I talked about this a little bit in my keynote speech, is that survivability should not be dependent on what district you live in and who's on duty.
Yeah.
Right? You shouldn't have to, oh shit, C shift engine 12 is on today. I don't have a chance of hell. Or if I call the Mayday and I hear engine 12 is getting assigned to rescue me, my anxiety goes up and I go, oh shit, I'm in trouble.
Right. No, you're right. There's a lot there, but I think talking in reality, right? Even the very best fire departments, fire companies, potentially could have a couple of these individuals there, because you can't get rid of all of them.
No, and you got to have room for them, because some of
Yeah.
it is going to be just a job. And the best you can do is hopefully bring them up and not allow them to drift further towards failure. There's a book that I quote, and Gordon Graham gave it to me, and it's Going Pro by Tony Kearns. And in his book, he lists 3 levels of professional. Level 1 is competent enough to earn a paycheck or remain a member if you're in a volunteer organization. A level 2, and we got to have room for those. A level 2 professional is they're going to become whatever the environment expects of them. If they go in a high-performing firehouse, they're going to be a high performer. A level 3 professional is somebody who's committed to continual improvement, and that's where we'd like to get everybody to be.
Yeah, I like that. I hadn't heard that before, but I like that. I think there's a lot to that. I want to ask you this. This is something that is really important to me, and something I'm still trying to put my focus on, a topic that I've come up with. We often talk about recruitment and retention. And a lot of times, especially in smaller departments, we put them in the same conversation, meaning it's the same committee, it's the same people working on both, and we consider them to go hand in hand with one another. And I really struggle with that. I've been creating a narrative around this. It's in my Bridging the Gap program. I start to talk about this topic more and more. And I always talk about retention first, recruitment second. We need to take care of what we already have in the door, right? These guys have come through the door. We're letting them down. Our organization is failing them. Maybe they're failing us, but maybe it's our fault. And we need to retain our people first. Create an environment where winners win. Create a culture of firemanship. Like you talk about, letting your people work. When you create that environment, the recruitment will come. But I think
they go hand in hand. If you got solid guys that are go out there preaching a positive message about your organization, it draws people in. So, yeah, you're exactly right. You know, unfortunately, we have to give attention to both. But
Yes.
You don't want to neglect your existing members for the new ones. And one of the things that I'm seeing more and more that concerns me is organizations lowering the standard because they can't get enough guys. And what is that doing to the guys that we've talked about, the ones that are all in, that have really worked to create something special, and now we're lowering the standard and we've got something that looks totally different.
I hate that. I really do. Like, it's frustrating, right?
It certainly is.
It's it's hard to talk about because when you think about, well, it is, right? Because I'm trying to put a conversational spin on this, right? But it's so hard for people in a leadership position to want to lower standards. And I'm even talking about like the volunteer councils that are out there and organizations and things on the volunteer side. And so on. It's finding common ground on the OSHA standards that are coming down the pipe, like all these things. And I'm not saying that all of it is good. That's what's presented, but we need to find a working program through all this.
Right.
But
right.
I find it super challenging for anybody that can stand there and say without a doubt that lowering standards is the right thing to do. That is troubling.
It's very. And I don't know if they believe it's the right thing to do. I think they do it out of necessity just to survive. You know, you got to get bodies on the rigs. But I also say every organization has something to offer. If you do a deep dive and you talk to your people and you say, what do we want to become? What type of person do we want to bring in? It's got to start there. Because once you do that, then it's kind of putting bait on a hook. When you know kind of the type of person you want to bring and keep in your organization, then you build a culture around that. You know, we have a huge training culture. We call it a chosen high-performance learning culture. Well, we don't have to worry about anybody coming into our organization that doesn't want to train because that's our reputation in the area. And they know if you come to the Colony Fire Department, you are going to train a lot. No discussion about it. So we don't have those issues. And our guys, it's gained roots now, and it takes on a life of its own. And the guys do way more training than the minimum. It's not coming from the fire chief. It's because they understand the value of it, and they're training for each other to protect one another.
When you have a culture, you don't have a minimum then in your department. That's the beautiful thing about it, right? Is like winning departments with a strong training culture, the minimum is so subpar and so sub-efficient to your people. They don't subscribe to any of that. There's nobody there hoping to get through that day. They're there wanting to do more that day. And that is a winning culture. And then what that does is through your recruitment then, it weeds out the guys that might be weak links for your organization because you set the standard far above what the minimum might be.
No, you're right, and it's kind of biting us in the butt right now is we haven't hired anybody out of an academy in years. Everybody we hire comes from another department. And I think, and this is false, but I think the rumor is out there, or the impression is, that as a new firefighter, you can't get to where we want you to be in a year, which is our probationary period. So it's kind of hurting us, and I don't know why that's out there. We certainly haven't said it, but that's the impression. And so, that's something you got to balance. But, we go after a very specific type of person who wants to come in and be more than the minimum. Now, every once in a while we get it wrong, but more times than not, we got guys that come from other organizations and women that come from other organizations that want to be hard chargers.
And this is what's exciting about the fire service, right? This is what I chuckle about because, I mean, outside of NFR, right, we're a full media marketing company too, right? So I work on media and marketing projects, and I do creative for media and all that stuff. But what I love is looking at recruitment in the fire service today, and the departments that are winning have an environment that they promote. They'll tell you flat out, I can't pay you the most. I can't give you the most vacation or sick time or comp or this, blah, blah, blah. They'll list it all off. But what we can give you is X, Y, and Z. And when you look at these younger generations today, right, the millennials, the Gen Z, right, even Gen Alpha coming up, they want experience. They want expectations. They want to know what the expectation is of them. They want to know the expectation of that department. Mm-hmm. And departments that are winning are out there promoting their culture and their firemanship. And they are the ones that are winning. And the departments that push pay or longevity, typically, they're getting anyone that's looking for a paycheck.
You know, you're right, but we're seeing something interesting. So I've been in the colony 17 years. And from about 2010 until 2024, what you said is exactly right. Right next door to us is Plano and Frisco. They're the highest paid departments in the state. Plano's got 4-person staffing. They got the best of everything. So our firefighters can drive 5 minutes more and get paid more money.
Right.
Now, we've been able to sell culture for about 15 years, but that's changing a little bit now.
Is it? Yeah.
The separation has gotten so great now because we're probably average to a little lower end on pay. We got great equipment. We take care of our people. But we've had 3 in the last year go to Plano. Now, one of them was a single role paramedic that wanted to be a firefighter. We didn't have a firefighter slot. But 2 others said they're going for the money. And they said, hey, thanks. We learned a lot here. We love it here. But, you know, when you can get to about $1,000 a month, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
Sure.
I understand that. But my fear is, Jeremy, and the reason for bringing it up, we've always played the culture card, and I think that's kind of run its course. Now we've just done 2 hiring processes. We don't get the numbers, but we get the quality. You know, we may only get 40, 50, 60 applicants, but out of that, we'll get some really quality people. So we're still hanging in there, but I'm seeing a change, and it's something
that's really interesting.
It's something I spent a lot of time thinking about.
Well, the other thing, too, is, I mean, where are we today? I mean, there's more opportunities in the pipeline than ever before. And if you can make $150,000 a year flipping Nikes on eBay, guess what? Who the hell wants to be a fireman?
Yeah. You know,
but
we're seeing that in all the trades.
Sure, 100%, right? But what I find really interesting, though, and something that you said that stands out to me, though, you might not be getting the numbers, but you're getting the quality. And isn't that what we want? Isn't what we want, quality over quantity?
Yep, I think so.
3 rock stars on an engine instead of 6, right?
Well, exactly. But, you know, you'll see these fire departments. You travel around like I, you know, they'll put these advertisements out. Oh, we had 300 people come test for us, right?
Right.
Well, you know, I think out of my 60, I'm getting every bit the quality of person that they are. I mean, I've got some phenomenal firefighters that have come from big cities, busy fire companies. They've taken a cut in pay and a cut in seniority because they have this vision of what being a firefighter is all about, and that's in the culture. And so, like, we just hired a guy now that's coming from Memphis Fire. And, you know, we're saying, dude, we don't fight fires like you guys do in Memphis. And he goes, you know, that's okay. And we've had people say it's not the amount of fires we go to, it's how the fires go that we do go to. And so all that stuff enters into it.
There's so much to that. I couldn't agree more. There's so much there, right? I mean, I'm just unpacking it. And I just think, though, that we're still in a very good place. I think that the people that want this job are flocking to a place, even if you're seeing the numbers drop a little bit, people are looking for direction. They want to work for a good department. When you go around and talk to people, what do they complain most about, right? What they complain about is a poor culture, lack of leadership, no direction. And those are things that ultimately will kill your career. And I'm even talking about volunteer fire service too, right? When you don't have structure, you get lost. And when you get lost, you can fall out of love with this. I did my program a couple weeks ago for 65 career fire chiefs in Massachusetts at the State Fire Academy, right? So I go in and I go, what am I going to I walk in the room and I had no idea that it was like an executive fire officer class that this was, right? They asked me to come speak. I speak all over the country, right? I've done my program over 30 times this year. This year alone, 30 times. So I go up there, I walk in the room, it's all gold in the room, and I'm like, what? Am I in a I said when I walked in, I go, am I in the wrong room? Right? I'm looking around. They're going to know. So I come in, and I'm going over it in my head. I go, okay, the program's going to hit about generational values, young versus old, and how we have to find common ground. I talk about all that stuff. But I said, what's my message? What can be their takeaway today? And for me, I came up with the idea of really selling them on the fact that they were in love with the job at one time. And I'm not saying they're not today.
Right.
But we all have our highs and lows in the fire service, right? I got 30 plus years in. I know you're 40 plus years, I believe, Chief.
Yeah, and
not to
we've
age
all
you,
had peaks and valleys.
100%. And I said your love today might be different than what it was yesterday, but if it's any less, take a second, take a pause, and think about how we can get you back before you go to retire. How do you find that love again, like those little butterflies in your stomach that we used to get all the time? And I said, I challenge you, all you guys, when you leave today, think about your people. Think about the new kids that come in and have this unconditional love for the fire service. What can you do to support them? How do you find your own roadway back and fall in love with this job all over again? Because it's worth it. And
it's so worth it.
The most comments that came out of that program was all about that stuff that I talked about. And I think sometimes we need that reminder.
No, it's so worth it. And, I'm getting close to retirement, and I got two sons that are on the job. And maybe it's not the best word, but I feel sorry for those people who have let themselves get to that point. Because you're going to walk out of here, and if you have to tell lies about what you did while you were on the job, that haunts you, man. So this job will give you everything that you put into it. You've got the opportunity. We're one of the few groups in America that's still trusted. And, I shared a story. I've said it a couple times. Pete Lund told me when I was riding with Rescue 3, he says, Scott, you have the opportunity every day to be a firefighter at the highest level. He said at the time in Plano, Texas, as I do in the South Bronx, it's just going to look a little different. And we do have that opportunity. But we got to recognize it. And it's okay to be a nerd about this job, to be cool and into the job, man. It's some of the saltiest firefighters I know love the job still, and that's pretty cool.
What I worry about, and part of that message, right, was making sure that we're doing our part to help these next kids, the next generation, fall in love with the job like I did. Mm-hmm. And we have an obligation to do that, and that takes work. We have to go all in on these kids. And today, more than ever, I think we have to maybe work a little bit harder, especially on the mechanical aptitude side, teaching the basics of the basics, right? There are certain things that, like kids coming in today, I look at my own kids, right? My 4 kids, they don't cut the grass. I was using a chainsaw at 12 years old. So there's that difference in the generational disconnect, right? So we have to work harder than ever before to teach those core values of this job and why it's worth falling in love with it. But, man, when you do and you get to that point, there's nothing better, Chief. There's nothing better. You
kind of hit on it. I'm going to go back a little bit. But one of the things we hear, so when we bring somebody in, we ask, why are you leaving the department that you're coming from and why you come to the colony? And we hear consistently, they like the idea of quality daily training. And that's what we say. It's not quantity, it's quality training. We're big into mentoring, and we have a formal mentoring program. So we hear, because they want that one-on-one relationship. It's just what you said. They want a lot of feedback. They want timely feedback. They want to know how they're doing. So, I believe mentoring is the future of fire service learning and leadership. Those organizations that embrace a formal mentoring process are going to have a much easier time navigating the things that we're talking about. What we're finding out, we're getting a group that loves the engine and truck deployment model. They want to know if they're going to be riding an engine or a truck because they want to get really good. They want that thing to focus on it and become a student and a practitioner, and not this, ass in a seat where today you're riding this, and I know the majority of the American Fire Service does that. But the generation coming in says, put me on an engine and let me be the best engine firefighter I can be, and then I'll think about that other stuff. So those are all little things, mentoring, coaching, immediate feedback, setting them up for success and not setting them up for failure.
Well, but it takes a you got to be in touch with your message, and like most fire departments are not. And you're looking at the generational values, and this younger generation that we're bringing in these entrance interviews are telling you what they want and need. You're listening, right? Because then that forms your message and your approach. How many people turn a blind ear to it's a formality, and they don't really listen to what's being told, right? Part of communication is listening.
More don't than do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think about it today, and I think about with the different generational values that are coming through, our departments have to work harder than ever before to tailor a program, to involve them from the get and understand how to reach them so we can teach them and give them our message.
Firehouse software got you buried in tabs, logins, and paper sign-in sheets. You've got one system for training, another for reporting, something else for alerting, scheduling, inspections. You get the idea. That's why departments across the country are switching to Alpine Software's Red Alert, the tailor-made fire service software that brings everything together in one system with one bill and no more paperwork. Red Alert replaces your pile of platforms with a single, customizable solution that handles training, alerting, inspections, truck checks, percentage reports, award points, ISO prep, OSHA tracking, the list goes on, everything you do your way. No two Red Alert systems are the same. Alpine builds your software around the unique needs of your department. And when it's time to switch, Alpine will convert all your old data with no setup fees at zero risk. Their entire team is based in Rochester, New York, which means no support runaround. You can pick up the phone and speak to somebody who understands the fire service and gets your issues fixed. With over 30 years of trust and an average customer tenure of 19 years, Alpine's mission is to be the last software purchase your department ever makes. It's battle-tested, firefighter approved, and nearest ready. So if you're ready to save time, reduce costs, and finally get control of your operations, visit alpinesoftware.com for a completely free consultation. That's alpinesoftware.com. Red Alert by Alpine Software. Built for the job, backed by firefighters.
And there's nothing wrong with that. They did it for my generation.
Yes,
they did it for ours. I came out, and my first captain was a Vietnam vet. He was an aerial door gunner. So in his world, I didn't know anything.
There's no messing around there.
Yeah, and that's just the way it was, right? But if we want to bring in people and develop them, we got to have those things in place. And you're right. I've had so many conversations with fire chiefs, and one of the first things I'll ask them is, Chief, how do you define success in your organization? Now, that seems to me like it would be a fair question.
Sure.
I haven't got a good answer yet. They'll say, well, we're an ISO 1. I said, well, that's great. That's a preparedness standard. But
looks good on the door.
Yeah, how do you measure your wins and losses? If a young person comes into your organization and says, Chief, what do I need to do to be successful here? Hopefully you've got something more than show up on time and wear the right uniform, which is what most of them are going to tell you. So, vision is a huge deal. If I can bring a young man and woman in and say, listen, if you buy into what we're selling, this is what we'll give you back. And we have an obligation as an organization. It used to be we'd have 3,000 people testing for 2 spots. Well, in where we are in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, if you're a firefighter, paramedic, you can go wherever you want to go. And if you don't like where you are, you can change. So the world has changed, and we're either going to adapt to it and listen and give them what they need, or we're going to be pissed off and frustrated and blame everybody else.
So often, though, we ask so much of our people, right? People come in, we put them through our system, and we were like, we need you to go all in on us. We need you to do this. We need you to potentially die for this job. And then our departments turn around and fall down on them left and right.
Yeah.
We have to find that balance, Chief. We got to get back to it.
And we do. And I'll have firefighters call me all the time, says, Chief, I'm thinking about moving to this other organization. And I said, well, that's okay. If that organization is not giving you what they promised you, if they're not giving you a place to make a career, all bets are off. Yeah. We have an obligation to set our people up for success. And, I call it psychological safety. And it's not everybody gets a trophy, or it's just if you choose us, out of all the choices, if you pick the Colony, Texas, we're going to do our best to invest in you, and because we want you to make a career out of this.
Well, that's the buy-in, right? I mean, that's what you want from your people. You want your people to be the very best on the street, then you got to give them the tools to be the best. And some of those tools are intangibles. Those are things that more like moral support, understanding, trust, commitment, right? All those things.
You know, we just hired a guy brand new, and he's a tech guy, but he came. He wasn't here 5 minutes, and he was looking at our bumper load, and we had a couple rigs where it gets hung up a little bit. He says, "Why don't we try this?" They pulled it, loaded it. It's a department standard now. He just saw it, and we changed it. How many departments would say, "Hey, punk, you hadn't been here long enough to give us any ideas," right?
I don't know if you've ever heard my Bridging the Gap class, but I talk exactly about front bumper lines and making a change within your department.
Oh, really?
I swear to, yeah, it's like a 10-minute part of my program where I talk about guys going external training and bringing it back and having a culture where we accept ideas from outside our zip code. That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
That's funny. No, I didn't. Well, we think
of
alike, right? We
similarities
got a
here.
common mindset.
Right? We really do. I mean, this whole conversation's been back and forth.
Well, we hang around with a lot of cool people. You know, we got to understand also, Jeremy, that there's, and not that you and I are the rock stars of the fire service, but we get around. But there's people that never heard of us. You know, and you mentioned National Fire Radio, and they're going to go, huh?
Yeah. What's that? Yeah.
And so that's okay too. But we get to hang around with some pretty cool people. We get to see the best of the best.
No doubt, but I also think too, Chief, and I've thought about this long and hard, I think some of the very best within the American Fire Service we've never heard from because they put their head down, they put in an honest day every time they're on their tour, and they mentor and they lead, and these could be 35-year senior men that have been through the Ripper 100,000 times, and they are tough as nails, and they do a good job every day. And I think what's really interesting, though, is today there's more of an opportunity to hear from those people than ever before. And, in fact, I would challenge them to maybe share some of their wealth outside of their own organization. There's nothing wrong if they don't, but, man, we need you. We need you.
That's the only thing I would add to what you're saying. You're right. There's a bunch of great firefighters out there that they don't want to be in the spotlight. They don't want to do that. But they got to where they are probably because somebody invested them. Somebody
100%.
mentored them. Somebody coached them. And I feel in this profession because we're just now starting to see science and data. Most of what we do is passed down from generation to generation. So I think if you're a successful fireman, you have an obligation to pass that down. That's just my belief. So, I don't think you got to be out there writing books and doing podcasts and saying, look at me, but saying, hey, I've had this investment in me. I'm going to pass that on. And that's kind of the fifth phase of our mentoring program is giving back. That closes the loop in mentoring.
Where did this mentoring program come from? Like, has it always been, or what's the roots of that?
Well, when I was in Lake Cities, I was brought in to take them from career to volunteer. And so I had 3 very young firefighters. So I kind of started thinking about it, but I didn't have a term for it. I was doing the things that mentoring programs do. I just didn't know what it was. And then I went to work for Rick Lasky. I was his training chief for 10 years. And Rick really introduced me to the whole mentoring thing. We did something called a mentor book. And then our step-up process was a mentoring process. So that's when I really started studying it. And we had great success in the colony in Louisville with mentoring. So when I got to the colony, we did the next generation, and I put together, I don't know if you've seen it, I put together a 60-page document called Formal Mentoring in the Fire Service.
I heard you talking about it. I would love a copy of that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And anybody listening, you go to my website, fireserviceleadership.com, and download it for free. But awesome. I have everything in there from what mentoring is to a letter to the chief to sell it. My goal is to get that in the hands of every fire department in America, then what they do with it. But I feel that strongly about it. I think I've got well over 30,000 downloads. But I really think mentoring is key to our future success.
I agree with you 100%, right? It's also an informal way, but formalizing it to protect the integrity of the job and the history and tradition that comes with this job, too. I mean, we can't lose sight of that.
I have nothing against traditional mentoring. The problem is, if you're a quiet person, you're not one of the cool kids and somebody doesn't seek you out, if maybe you don't go to a great firehouse, you don't get to benefit from that mentoring relationship. So my only reason for proposing a formal process is so everybody gets that relationship. And you got to give the mentors tools. They're the ones who kind of preach the message about the chosen culture and what the vision is and keep us in our lane. So it's a pretty powerful thing.
I like that. I wonder, or I often talk about in mentorship that we always talk about the mentor, but you have to be willing to be mentored, right?
Sure.
And you know that comes from
It's a two-way deal.
understanding the humility and being humble enough in the process to understand that there are things out there that you don't know, and there are people that can instill some incredible value into you, but you have to be willing to be mentored.
Well, you said you're 30 plus years. I'm 40 years. I'll tell you, Jeremy, I'm learning more now than I ever have.
Me too.
I'm learning.
Me too.
I spent a whole 3 or 4 hours talking to Mo Davis the other day. I was talking to Frank Leave and Driver Joe the other. I'm learning. Rob Ramirez. I'm learning every day.
Right.
And so but also we're mentoring people right now, people that we will never meet. You've probably gotten those. Hey, I've never met you, but I've considered you a mentor for the last 2 years because they sit in and listen. And so because of social media and technology, we can do that now. I take it very seriously. I'm very cautious with the message that I put out because there's so many young firefighters that see, years on the job and they're going to take that as gospel. So we got to be responsible with our words and our message.
No doubt. We have to be very protective of that because you're right. And not only that, but I find too today more than ever, there's a blind follow. It's they're influenced, they're swayed, and okay, that must be the message. And I think I think it was even you that talked about it, where you talked about people buying into a person or an organization or a training group, and next thing you know, they believe everything they're talking about is gospel and not vetting everything that they talk about.
No, that's and I try to say this as positively as possible. But if you work for a big department and you're an inner city fireman, you immediately have credibility.
Yes.
Right? But Cody Trestrail said it the best. He said, I've met some of the best firemen in the hood and some of the worst.
Sure.
Right? So you always, I've seen firemen in very small fire departments that are top notch that I'd go to fires with. Now, obviously, the more fires you go to, the more experience you're going to get, and so forth. But it's just the cool kid thing, right? Oh man, this guy looks salty, so therefore he must know what he's doing.
Sure.
Most of the time that's right, but you got to vet everything. You got to do a little research because social media. One of the negatives about it is it's a platform to put out, as you know, any garbage that you want. And people think because you're presenting at a conference, you must be some kind of expert, and we all know that's not the case.
I am so particular and protective of things that I say, how I put it out there, how I lead. Even interactions when you're in public, you have to look at people in the eyes, shake their hands, introduce yourself to them. I mean, when you decide to do something like this, Chief, you have to own it. And that it is you. It consumes you. It's a lifestyle. It's not a chosen, I'm going to turn it on here, turn it off here. You have to run with this 24 hours a day. I absolutely get that.
And it goes back to what you said. When you do that, you're going to have haters, right?
100%.
And you just got to be able to deal with that. I've got people that I was friends with that because of my message, they don't talk to me anymore. I've had people say I'm ruining the fire service. I've had people say I'm trying to kill firemen. All these things, and having two boys in the job, I don't want to put them in a situation where they gotta fade my crap but I had to, unfortunately, when I wrote the book and started teaching, I had to pick a side. It was either going to be fire chiefs or firefighters, and I picked the firefighter group, and I'm glad I did. But when I get a phone call from Sammy Hiddle or Mike Torres or any of the guys who trust me enough to call a fire chief, I made the right decision.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. Absolutely. I love, too, hearing that you chose, before you wrote the book, you chose to go to a year worth of fire chief conferences and a year worth of firefighter conferences. I just thought that was, it's a 2-year approach to your life's work, and that's commitment to making sure that you're dialed in with your message. I love it.
It was such a great exercise. And really, it was my writing coach who said, when you sit down to write, picture the people that you're writing to. Well, the book is designed for fire chiefs and company officers to get them thinking alike and working together. So to me, it just made sense. Let me go undercover in each of those groups. And I asked a lot of the same questions, but this is what I found out at the firefighter conferences. Firefighters are much more willing to get in the weeds on conversations than fire chiefs are. Fire chiefs tap
100%.
out pretty quick.
Yes.
They don't want to have those uncomfortable the minute they start feeling uncomfortable or they're being challenged, they tap out.
Yeah, they can't commit.
It's a little sad.
Think about that, right? I mean, if anyone we want, I mean, obviously the backstep firefighter's got to make decisions all day long on a fire ground. But shit, in a command role, I need my chiefs to make decisions and stand by their decisions, right? That's terrifying when you think about that. I'm with you, Chief.
And there's a lot of great ones out there. There's a lot of great ones out there. But
of course,
too many fire chiefs default to no matter how smart the comes in with
keep going.
Yeah, they come in with a great idea and they default to no because it's safe. If you say yes, it requires more work. So they just say no. Well, you're never going to get anywhere because that's the mindset at the top. So it's like you're spinning the wheels in the mud.
This is unbelievable how we are just identically the same. I have a slide in my program with Nancy Reagan, and it just says, just say no, from the 80s crack epidemic, right? This is your brain. Is your brain on drugs? Any questions?
I love it.
The eggs are frying, right? I talk about the no culture and how we need to create a yes culture. And the no culture controls the narrative. And weak leaders who lack their own skills and abilities will never say yes because it empowers their people. So they'll always say no.
There's so much truth to that. There's so much.
Yeah.
And you know what really...
Thank you for validating that. That was awesome.
No,
cool.
It's true. And you're familiar with the book of Search that Corley put out?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fascinating thing about that, Corley called me and said, Chief, I want 3,000 words on Search from the chief perspective. That's all he told me. But you read that book, and there's a consistent mindset throughout the entire book. There's not really a one-off in there. It's a common mindset to the job, right? And so that's kind of like what we're talking about. If you want to get that level of buy-in, you got to say yes. You got to be willing to take some risks. And sometimes things aren't going to work out. You regroup and you try over. But if the best I can give my organization is no, where are we going to be in 5 years? Same place we are today.
Yeah, right.
And
Absolutely.
complaining about the same problems we had yesterday today.
We do that really well, Chief. We do it really well. I want to ask you this. I want to change gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Where the hell does all this come from with you? Like your back. I hate when that does that. When you're back, like your background. How did you find this road to the type of leader in chief you are today? I mean, this has to come from influence throughout your fire service career, probably in your upbringing, your family. Like you're a hard charger. You believe, you have conviction. You speak with intent. You deliver a strong message and can back it up, and you're willing to stand on that platform. Like so many don't or can't. So where does that come from for you? Because you do take shots and people do come after you. And so your reputation is on the line and you do stand proud of who you are and what you've done and your accomplishments. So where packaging all that up, where the hell does this come from? Because it's a grind.
Well, it is. But Jeremy, I never wanted to be anything but a fireman. That from day one, I never altered. And I grew up 40 miles north of New York City. So as I was growing up, it was during the war, Croton-on-Hudson, Westchester County.
No kidding. Yeah, I'm right around the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Bergen County. I'm 25 minutes outside of the city.
I know exactly.
I was just up in Croton. Yeah, I was just up in Croton like a week ago.
So
That's
little town, Volley Fire Department, the fire whistle would go off, and I'd get on my bike, and so it started there. And in my mind, I always thought I was going to be a New York City fireman. As luck would have it, we came to Texas, but I've just always loved it, and I was afforded the opportunity to go ride, like I say, different places, and that's just what I loved. I started getting Fire Engineering magazine in 1975. Wow. And my dad used to say most teenagers have Playboy by their bed. You got Fire Engineering magazine. You bust my chops.
I was the same way. That's funny.
But I just loved it. And then my first department was Plano, and Plano was it's a respectable department. But I had some. I went to Special Ops right away, and they hadn't got a new firefighter in a long time. So those senior men had a huge influence. They took it serious. We had a lot of fun. But I've always had this vision of what I thought being a firefighter should represent. And that's, truth be told, why I've worked for so many organizations, is that I've been chasing something. And when Rick Lasky changed my life, the way I lead, the way I look at things, and I needed that. Yeah. And so the colony came open, and the challenge to myself was, can I all these things that people taught me, can I make this vision a reality? Now that's just in Scott Thompson's head. It doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but I can tell you, we all like to say we're students. I'm probably a student to a fault. I have these little notebooks all over the place. I probably have hundreds of these, and I've always written down my thoughts, and I'm fascinated about it. And I believe there you go. There you go. But if you're a student of leadership, I think fire service leadership is one of the most challenging leadership environments, because you're decentralized, you have multiple firehouses, multiple shifts. So when you're talking about culture, it's much easier to create a culture if everybody's under one roof and everybody comes to work at 8 o'clock, goes home at 5 o'clock. So I'm a huge student of leadership, and I just think this is the leadership challenge I want. Now, I'm also, you talked about the seasons that we go through. I spent about 3 years trying to disprove everything I believe in. I wanted to see the other side. And when I got done with that exercise, I don't want to say this arrogantly, but I believe in what I believe, and I can back it up. I'm not saying it's the right way. I'm not saying it's the best way. But I feel like that I've put in the work, and then I've tried to remove all my biases. So my message, I feel, is a fair message, and I feel that it's worthy of the fire service. One of the reasons I didn't self-publish my book and that I went through fire engineering is because I wanted that editorial process. I wanted the Ray McCormick's, the Rick Laskey's, the Bobby Haltons reading my book, and I wanted to make sure it was worthy of the fire service. So, I mean, it's just been a lifelong. I don't have any other hobbies. The fire service has been my hobby. I don't golf.
So that was what I was going to ask you, right?
And that's a fault. I don't recommend that, but it's been my life. And so I didn't really start feeling comfortable until probably 10 years ago. I mean, it took me that long before I felt I had a message that I felt I could back up, that I believed in. And to this day, one of my motivations is I want to build a fire department that I would want my sons working for, and that I would want responding to save my grandbabies. And that makes it crystal clear in my head.
Well, it can be that simple, right? But we overcomplicate this thing times 100 all the time, right? Your approach, though, is that. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say we do. We go out of our way to make it more complicated.
Yeah. Your approach is impressive, because and I mean that with the most sincerity, is that you put the work in to be able to get the message out, I guess is a good way to say it. And when I sit here, and I've interviewed a lot of people, and and you don't, people everybody's got a message, right? And it's however sometimes, but the message, the way it's delivered, and then you get that conviction behind it. And speaking with you tonight, I mean, there's conviction throughout, and it's because it's tried and true. I mean, there's no smoke here, right? There's no theory, right? Because I always say in the fire service, you can read about it, you could train about it, but until you actually do it under real conditions, it's theory. You haven't done it.
Right.
And for you, through your fire service career, and then through the command and administration side, you've done that too. And so it allows you to have this message that you share.
But I never looked at it as work. It's just truly been a passion. And fire service leadership, it is an art and it is a science. If you think about it, philosophy and emotion-based opinion is driving a lot of the fire service. And we allow that to happen because people don't want to do the deep dive. They really don't want to understand it. They just want to, brush it off and say, well, we've always done it this way, or, so-and-so says this. But when I walk out the door, I truly want to leave it a little bit better than I found it, and
Sure.
and I just found a comfortable, if you will. I know Aaron Field says comfort is the enemy of, or
Right.
places, whatever he says, but it's just truly been a life for me, and like I say, now that my sons are on the job, it's just given me so much more that it's been very easy for me to give, and just like I said, it's been a great time. I never thought about it as work or a job. It's just been a lifestyle.
But this grind, though, right, has allowed you to formulate your opinions because you've done it. And I think what I worry about is people, think about your tenure growing up in the fire service. How many leadership books were you starving to read when you had was it a Vietnam veteran?
Vietnam, that was my cat.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like there were no leadership books, but I mean there were a couple.
No,
right.
not
But
like we have
today,
now.
everybody's starving to learn or be a better leader. When in fact, the only way you get really good at it is you actually do it.
And you learn from your mistakes. This kind of
100%.
school of hard knocks.
That's it.
I've made a lot of
That's it.
mistakes. I've made a lot of leadership mistakes. I made a big
Yeah.
one very recently, but I think a lot of it has to do with what is the intention. Also, I've always had the intention of trying to do the right thing for the majority of the organization. When you're fire chief, sometimes you got to make those tough decisions, sometimes the unpopular ones. But if you can lay your head down at night and in your head rationalize that it was the best thing at the time for the best reason, that's the best you can do. But you got to be educated, and you got to stay relevant. If you're working off old information and old experiences, then you're slipping back to kind of that theory or, I remember that, and you're not living it in real time, if that makes sense.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. And in fact, I'm glad you kind of put it that way, because even for yourself with the tenure that you have, just admitting that you made a slip up not too long ago in a judgment or a decision, right? Like, you're still learning this job also. And it's what do you do with being humbled? Because this job will always humble you, whether you're on the line, force at a door, or you're on the roof, or you're driving the Chiefs buggy.
That quick.
This job will humble you.
Yep.
What do you do with
it? You can't ever forget that. You can't, that's why, I love my guys, and I say my guys are great. But we could have a tragic event tonight, and that all changes. And you can never forget that. And when it happens, there's going to be a line of people outside my door that said, "I told you so." And I got to be ready for that.
But I also think, too, and it's like myself and a lot of other people that are willing to put their voice to their name and put themselves out there and take a stand. You're always going to have people that push back, right? And it's just a fact of life, and it's what you do with that. For me, early on, it was almost crippling, in the beginning. And then I realized that,
it is.
Yeah, no doubt. And then it took me a while to understand that whatever that is can't affect what I believe is the right thing to do. And I always say, don't ever let somebody else dictate your morals, ethics, and values. Don't ever sacrifice them for someone else.
No,
period.
and I don't know who coined the phrase, but this is true. To date, I have never been criticized by somebody doing more than me.
That's right.
It's always the
That's
people. Right. It's always the cheap seats. It's the drive-by.
I like that.
And so, but it takes a while to get there. You got to get that confidence. You got to be humble. You can never think you know it all. You just got to be comfortable in knowing what you know, and because you did the work to get there. And like I say, tomorrow my outlook could be totally different. But I also, during the course of my career, when I was in Plano, we were very influenced by Phoenix. So we did a lot of stuff the Phoenix way when Brunacini was there. And then when I went to Arlington, Bill Strickland had just come from L.A. City. So I had to learn the West Coast way of doing things. And then going to work for Rick Lasky, I had to learn the East Coast way of doing things. So in my 40 years, really 3 times I had to relearn the fire service. So that in itself was an exercise, about the use of fans, vertical vent, this type of nozzle, that type of nozzle. And so being exposed to those things in a bunch of different systems, you start to draw conclusions, and then you kind of test them and you begin to believe in them.
Well, it's a great segue because I was going to ask you. I was going to circle back a little bit when you were talking about Chief Lasky, but you brought up so many great things there that really go right to where I wanted to go with this conversation. Was how impactful was it working for different fire departments? Because
Huge.
all of that shapes where you are today, right?
Huge. And I start off my class, Jeremy, I say the only thing that qualifies me to stand in front of you is my exposure to a lot of great leaders and a lot of fire department organizations. I've seen different things, and I've seen what works, and I've seen what hasn't. And those leaders have been huge influences. But the firefighters that I've worked with have been huge influences. But yeah, I've worked for chiefs that were great managers, and I've worked for chiefs that were great leaders, and I worked for chiefs that were great losers. And so you learn something from each of them.
No doubt. And I think that's the most important thing. And in your career, you were able to do that as you promoted and moved up through the system. But for the regular firefighter, it doesn't mean to bounce around from job to job. It means go out and train. Go out and find different people with different ideas or different thoughts, or go to a different part of the country and go to a conference or training. Get out of the comfort of your zip code.
Listen to a podcast. You know, there's an outside world out there, and it's big. And there's a lot of stuff to learn.
And that's what's exciting about the fire service today. We focus so much on the negative side of social media and where we are today. But the upside of it is it provides, just like selling Nikes on eBay, it provides more opportunity than ever before. So if you feel like you're stuck on an island, because I get those emails and DMs all the time from guys that feel that they're drowning in their own department. They're looking for more. They can't find it. Their department won't give it to them. Nobody's interested. I said, then get out. Go find. You can find people more today than ever before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
You're in a good place.
You also got to challenge them also to say, though, you know, what is the reason? You know, can you be a greater influence in your own firehouse? Don't let all the white noise and the distractions beat you down. You know, when my son was in Dallas, my youngest, he was in the worst firehouse I've ever been in. I mean, these guys were just absolutely horrible. And he would be out back stretching lines and throwing ladders, and they'd be sitting in the shade drinking tea, heckling them. And I said, man, just keep doing what you're doing, and somebody will come find you. And Truck 36 came by one day to pick up something. He was out there doing that. He was out of there the next day and going to a squared away company. But I also say you learn as much from the bad environments that you do from the good ones. And it's much easier, it's much more difficult to lead when you're being challenged than if you have a rock star crew. If all your guys are squared away, leadership is easy. It's when you have those different personalities and those different challenges, that's when you learn something about yourself.
I like that. I like that a lot. What has it been for you now that you've found your groove? I mean, you have a very strong message. You travel, you speak a lot at different conferences. You've written books. You have your training company. You have your website. All these things you're involved with, Chief. Your impact. You certainly are leaving it better than you found it.
I hope so.
Legacy. I have to believe for you, legacy is very important.
It is, and you know, I had to make a decision. I kind of hit on it, but my focus is not to try to influence the chiefs that are chiefs today. It's influence the next generation of fire chiefs. I hope that Scott Thompson can somehow influence a great captain or a great battalion chief to put himself in that chief's position. Because if we want firefighter-friendly fire chiefs, we got to get those guys that understood the job and were respected at the company level and battalion level. But you know, a lot of great firemen, they don't want to think above that battalion chief level, and I get it.
That's right.
So if I can inspire one or two to just say, hey, listen, the fire service is bigger than I am. I'm going to put myself in that position for the good of the organization. Then that's kind of what my goal is that next generation of fire service leaders.
We need them to have a seat at the table, and more so now than ever before. I mean, there are so many great guys out there that just don't want to go up that rank, and I just look at it and say, oh, 100%. However, then we don't get to complain on the back end when we're not seeing change come down that represents what we want as the backstep firefighter, right? Yeah, exactly. And so the only way we're going to do that is when we put the right people into those positions, period.
Exactly right.
This episode's brought to you by EaseAlert Heart Smart Alerting Solutions. Have you ever been jolted awake by a blaring station alarm only to sprint out half asleep, heart pounding? That's that legacy fire station alerting system, and it's doing much more harm than good. So meet EaseAlert, the world's first heart-smart firefighting alerting system. Designed by firefighters, proven by science, their purpose-built alerting devices deliver vibration and visual alerts, shaving seconds off of turnout times while improving health for the first responder. EaseAlert isn't just about comfort, it's about safety. Firefighters are 14 times more likely to die from heart attacks during alarm responses than during non-emergency duties. EaseAlert's Heart Smart system slashes stress, improves performance safety, and allows you to be the best firefighter you can be, on duty and at home. From bunk alerts and wristbands to dispatching consoles, display boards, and firehouse lighting, every component is purpose-built by firefighters for firefighters. No more missed tones, no more startled response, just fast, smooth, safe alerts. Fire departments across the country, like Mission, Texas, and St. Augustine, Florida, report calmer crews and faster turnout times, and their chiefs even say that the system is battle-tested and firefighter approved. So are you ready to switch? Visit easealert.com and discover how silent alerting can save time, reduce stress, and improve safety for you, your crew, and your community. Visit easealert.com to learn more and tell them National Fire Radio sent you.
You're exactly
Got to
right.
have a seat at the table to have a voice for sure. Legacy for you, I know, is super important. Your two sons are in the job, and as you said, you might be seeing some downtime in the future for yourself.
Yeah.
I don't believe there's going to be any downtime, and I think you'll take on a number of challenges once that's done. What has the fire service done for you? Like, I know what it's done for me with my friends and the people that I've come to rely on and love, and the experience and the personal growth and all those things. But, like, for you, have you ever sat back, because you're a doer, so chances are you haven't taken much time to sit in that chair you're sitting in right now and just take a breath and think about it all. But when you do, or when you have the opportunity to do that, what does that look like for you?
It's given me everything. It's put me in touch with some of the people I respect the absolute most. Great individuals doing this job. It's given me purpose. I'm one of those who's defined by what I do, and I don't say that proud. But I'm a firefighter. That's my identity, and probably why I'm still working. And I don't know what life after this looks like. I'd like to write another book, but it's given me everything. And I never pushed my sons to be a firefighter. But we recently did a show with Lasky, a hump day, where John Salka had his boys on and I had mine. And listen to my boys talk about the little things. I remember Dad's bunker pants by the front door, and I remember him getting up in the middle. I mean, all those things. And now they're doing that, and they're so much smarter than I am, where I wasn't in that day. So I think they're going to do better things. But, man, it's given me everything. I mean, it scares me when I think if I would have chosen another path, and now that I walk out of this and somebody said, what did you do for 40 years of your life? And I don't have the stories, the colorful stories, and the relationships, and the feeling of pride and accomplishment. I sold widgets for 40 years. So,
Right.
I mean, I can't say enough. It's given me everything. And I remember back in Croton-on-Hudson, we'd go to eat at this restaurant, and the firehouse was behind it. And as soon as I was done eating, I'd jump out of there and I'd go hang out over in the firehouse. And I mean, like I say, some of the greatest human beings I know are firefighters.
There's so much to
So
that.
much.
And I think, though, the reward for you is because you went all in on it. I mean, that's what we want from our people, right? We're asking our people to go all in on it. And then guys like you and I tell them, listen, if you're willing to give yourself to this, and I know it's not the easiest thing, and there's sacrifice built in.
And there's going to be mental and physical scars.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt, it comes with it. But if you give yourself to this, I promise you, the back end, it's beautiful.
And you can do, you can host a podcast, you can write articles, you can write a book, you can teach, there's so many things. And when you look at our country today, firefighters are still part of the old fabric of America. We're
Yes.
still trusted. People still believe in us. And if they have a choice of who they're going to trust, it's going to be a fireman. And that just, man, if you're going to live a life of purpose, I just think it's a great, the military is, there's many of those, but it just scares me to think if I had chosen. And my dad was a businessman. My dad wanted me to be a lawyer. He wanted me to go to Syracuse, and luckily I was too stubborn to take his advice.
Well, that's good. We all appreciate that.
Wow.
Thank you for sticking to your guns there, Scott.
Thank
We appreciate
you.
that.
Thank you.
You mentioned something about your sons, which I think is really cool. Just recently, I did an episode with my father.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. I saw that where you sat down at the table.
So cool, man. It was certainly a highlight in my life, and he's one of those people that there's nobody better than him.
Isn't that awesome?
It is, and when we got to really talk about it, and part of it was that work-life balance conversation where he went all in, and today he says, I think I went too far and this and that, and I told him I don't think you did it all, because what you did was taught us the way we want to be in life. Like you taught us work ethic and love and how to love our family, all those things. So I said, you don't get to turn around and have any regret. Maybe for you could have made a couple more events, but would that have really mattered? And it's such an incredible opportunity. And I think about how great the fire service is for me. And so to be able to share that with your children has to be really, because they were there through your hard times and when you're working and absent and all those things.
During birthday parties and
right?
all, yeah. And you felt great guilt about that.
Yeah, 100%. And yet they still found their way to it, and I'm sure they have their own love and passion for it today, just like you.
Oh, they're all in, and they're at a great
beautiful.
firehouse. They're working in the same department now. They're at the same firehouse. One's on A shift and one is B shift. And I'll tell you, and I never expected it, but I remember when they first started getting a call from one of their captains and saying, "Hey, Chief, this is so-and-so. You don't know me, but I got your son, and he gets it. He's a squared-away fireman." And, man, that's all we want. That's all we want on our tombstone is he was a go-to guy. He was a good fireman. Yep. And you want the good parent and a good spouse, but, man, if a respected fireman calls you a good fireman, that's pretty cool.
That's all you got. That's all you need. That's all you need. Done.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've done my job. But what I find really interesting and where I wanted to take this was why are so many not wanting the fire service for their own kin today?
Man.
And that's a struggle for me, Chief, to try to scratch in my head, trying to think about why. Is it that bad? Do you not want this for your children? Like, it gave so much to you, it provided, or I don't know. I guess it's a case by case, but
well, let's start out with the conversation. Why doesn't everybody love the job? You get to come in and you get to jump on a big red truck and go out the door and save America. What is there not to love about this? Yeah, there's long hours, you see bad stuff, but you're part of a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and you have purpose, and you're doing good in society. So you got to start with, why isn't everybody that's on the job loving the job? And then, I worry about my kids because I know the toll that it takes, and I know the stuff that they're seeing and experiencing, and it does cause relationship challenges. And when they get my age, are they going to be drinking or something? It does take a heavy toll if you don't learn how to manage it. But I'm going to say this, and people will hate me with this, but we're so normalizing having problems.
Yes.
That if you don't have one, you're not normal. And I'm like, sure, there's mental health and there's cancer and those kind of things, but we're almost making it like if you're not suffering from one of those, you're abnormal. And so we got to balance that. I get it. It's kind of new. And so, I spent a lot of time thinking about that exact question, and I don't know if I've come to my conclusion. But I don't know why every kid in America doesn't. The first books we're read to as babies involve fire trucks and Dalmatians.
Right, 100%.
Our first toys are fire trucks. We go to parades and we see the shiny rigs. Why doesn't every kid in America want to be a fireman?
Yeah, there's so much there, and I really hope. I just, I think about it, and I just know what it's done for me.
Yeah.
And sure, it's presented tremendous challenges in my life too, right?
Sure.
But I also have to take ownership of that also. And I don't get to just point to the firehouse and blame the firehouse for it. You have to take ownership in that conversation too, right? It's a two-way street. And I just think that it's a great institution, and I look at the career fire service, but I also look at the volunteer fire service and
It's
why
the majority
kids,
of America's fire service.
Yeah, and why aren't these kids of members joining the firehouse anymore, right? Why are they? And I struggle with that.
Well, I
really do.
I think the generation, and this is not a fault of an individual, but there's no resilience in the generation coming into the fire service, with exception. I mean, the military does it, but if I look at it from the way I was raised, without any conflict, without any challenges, mom and dad are always fighting my battles for me, going to my teachers. None of that ever happened with me.
Nope.
You fixed your own bike and you survived. And then you look something as massive as a fire service, and I think it's so intimidating and so overwhelming. They're just like, man, I just can't even imagine a world like that. I think that's kind of part of it. I've had people that have been through an academy, and they come on the job and they got no idea what a firefighter does. And it's just like, what did you think we did? Just drove around and blew the siren and wore cool t-shirts and slid down the pole? There's a disconnect somehow, and I don't know where that starts or how we fix it. I think it's going to get better. Everything is cyclical, and I think what do they say? Bad times create strong men.
Yeah, G. Michael Hoff is
right.
his saying. I put that in my program,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I read it. There's so much to that, right? Good times create weak men.
it.
Weak men create hard times, and so on. But there's so much to that. I just want to stress it this way. I want to challenge everybody that listens to this. Think about how you project the fire service to your children today. Like when you come home, career fireman, you come home off shift. What are you saying about the job?
Yeah, are you bitching about it?
Right,
or are you saying,
right.
hey, it was
Right.
It was a good day.
Or in a volunteer firehouse, do you bring your son or daughter with you to see what you do, and that it's not a social club, but you're actually working hard on behalf of the residents of your community, and you have an absolute passion and love for it, and you want to share that with your children. I think part of our problem today is we're not packaging the message as well as we used to. My father was incredibly proud to be a fireman, and he was very protective of it, and he never spoke bad about it. I never heard my father speak bad about probably anything or anybody. And then you think about today, and we project so much out there that I think our children get a sense that it's a place they don't want to be because they hear it from our own mouths.
Yeah.
And I think that's a disservice to them.
There's probably a lot of truth to that. And when most people are fighting to work from home, now you got to leave for 24 hours or 48 hours. I think all that plays into it. I think the blood kind of and the gore aspect. I just don't think, we watched the cartoons where Roadrunner got hit on the head with an anthill and all that stuff was going on, and we've removed all that from society, and so I just think all that plays into it. But I think you're right. How are we honoring this profession, and are we making it attractive to people who don't know a lot about it and kind of go, wow, that's, I think the fact that let's talk about the volunteers. You remember you lived in the communities and they blew the fire whistle in
100%.
town. And so everybody knew, and you saw the cars with the blue lights going back and forth, and they were part of the community. Well, then we went to plectrons and pagers, and you didn't know when they were getting a call, so you never thought about it. And if they weren't in the parades like they used to be and all that other stuff, because everything took much more importance over it, I think all that plays into it.
I would agree with you. I really do. I think there's a lot there, and I think I think we are sometimes our own worst enemy when it comes to, our own self-promotion and talking about how great the job truly is. But
I've talked to very good firemen who said, I don't ever want my kids to do this job,
Right.
And they've said that, and they're good. They're good all-in firefighters. They said, no way. I don't know.
Yeah, I hey, to each their own, I guess. But, I don't know. I think it's a profession that we can still be very proud about.
Absolutely.
Volunteer career. I think we should be very proud about the service that we provide, the hard work, the effort that goes into it. And personally, I look at the personal growth. I mean, what it's done for me. Even with national, I will tell you this, Chief. Even in the last 7 years with National Fire Radio, this has held me more accountable than anything in my life.
And did you ever think you'd be doing this when you became a firefighter, that you'd be hosting this national show and having all these people on, right?
No. And in the reach we have, I mean, it's insanity when I think the podcast had over 2 million downloads last year, right? It's insanity to think that our social media has between 3 and 5 million impressions a month on social media.
Looking at all the rigs and all the innovation and all the people you talk about, I mean, it's a cool thing.
But it is. But I think about why it works. And I think it's because it comes from a very authentic place that I put legacy before anything else. And at the end of the day, I don't care. I leave money on the table every single day when I do projects with National Fire Radio, when we work with manufacturers and different avenues and things we're involved with. It's not about any of that. For me, and I think why it works, and there's some other platforms out there that believe in the same mantra, that it's bigger than you, and you do it because you have an absolute passion for it, and it's that unconditional love for protecting this job. And that's it. And if I'm going to share my insights and information and bring on guests like Scott Thompson, like who has a love and conviction in his beliefs for this job, then I'm doing it right. Like, we're doing it. It's not the selfish endeavor for me is I get to talk to you tonight and we get to catch up, right? That's the selfish endeavor for me. But the rest of it is I want to share this and try to make this just a little bit better.
And we're still a profession where you don't have to have a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. If you come in and just hard work, you can get to the best fire companies in the city, go to the best jobs from hard work and just being dedicated to this. And there's not a lot of those professions out there where you have those opportunities where hard work pays off like it does in the fire service. I think that's
Chief, I'll tell you this. I heard you mention Mike Rowe in one of your conversations. And you look at his commitment and what he does with his organization and providing scholarships for furthering education in the trades. I mean, it's such a noble thing that he does, and his message is so powerful and strong. I can give you a personal story. My daughter is graduating high school a week from tonight, and she's graduating. She's 18 years old. She's this beautiful girl who is incredibly creative and talented. Thank you. And I'm so happy for her. But a year and a half ago, she wasn't herself, and we would talk with her, and what's going on? What's going on? Nothing. And then finally one night, she says to myself and my wife, Terry, she goes, "Can we talk?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I don't think I want to go to college." And I go, "Well, then don't." And she looked at me, and this weight came off of her. Yeah. And you have to understand, like where I am, we have a 99% 4-year degree out of high school. Kids go to 99% of the graduating class goes off to a 4-year education. And she's one of probably 6 kids in our whole class that aren't going to college right out of high school. And I said to her, I watched the stress come off. She was terrified to tell us that she didn't want to go to school. It wasn't for her. And I saw that coming from a mile away, but she had to find it on her own.
You couldn't. Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I said, you're so talented in so many different aspects. I mean, this kid is more creative than anyone.
What does she want to do? Does she want to get into art or the creative arts?
She doesn't. Well, she is, right? So she's incredibly talented. I mean, this is a kid that can paint, sculpt, draw, makes her own clothing,
Really?
does nails. Right now, she's into nails, like high-end artwork on fingernails.
Wow.
She has kids coming to the house for $100 a pop doing their nails.
They're not cheap.
I go, you don't have to go to college. You do 2 or 3 of those a day, you'll be fine. Like, what are you worried about,
There you
right?
go.
But the thing is like empowering her to understand that she has options. And that's what I want. Like, we want that for our children, right? So I guess that's the other side of the coin of what we're talking about. We want that for our children to understand that there is other options. But damn it, the fire service should be an option for everyone, and we should, us in it, should portray why it's so good.
I agree. And there's there's many more good things than there are negatives.
I couldn't agree with you more, Chief. And I think on that, thank you. Thank you for an awesome conversation.
Thank you. It went by quick.
Oh, it always does. And I mean, we could go for
Yeah.
another 3 hours, but I want to be respectful of
No,
your time.
I'm
but,
good, and I enjoyed it. I think we share a mindset, and hopefully,
You talked about bicycle repair. I talk about bicycle repair in my freaking It's outrageous how in tune we are. I mean, I just sat here tonight listening, and it's, for me, Chief, tonight has been an absolute validation of all of my thoughts and collective ideas as to what I think we need to be talking about. And so you validated so many of my talking points tonight. So thank you.
and we'll listen. We'll listen to the other side of it, but we're not going to let them steal our joy. We're not going to let them steal our passion. And we believe in what we believe for the right reason, and so we'll push forward and take on the next challenge.
I think being able today in the environment that we're in to be able to take a stand for something you believe in and have conviction in your thoughts and ideas. Often we are construed, you and I and others are construed as bullies, when in fact it's just conviction.
And passion.
We
Right,
believe
right.
in passion. Right.
No, I agree.
Chief Scott Thompson out of the colony. Thank you, brother. Thank you
you,
very
brother.
much
I
for a
enjoyed
wonderful episode tonight. Yeah, we're going to have you back on soon. I think you and I could do this for hours upon hours.
Anytime you invite, I'll show up, and I look forward to running into you on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. We've bumped into each other a few times, and this episode's been long overdue. So thank you for taking my cold call a couple of weeks ago and asking you to be on. I appreciate it.
Let's do it again.
And I see you're wearing your Joey D shirt, so thank you for representing that as well. It's very close to me.
A great cause.
Yeah, for sure. So, Chief, stay right here. Oh, first off, where can people find you? Because there's probably people that don't know you, and so I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just there's different circles, right? So where can people find you? They want to reach out. They want to dissect more of your, or get that 30-page mentor or 60-page.
Yeah.
Where can I get
that?
that?
Go to fireserviceleadership.com. You can download that, and I also have a training package on there that you can download for free. You got to put a little information. If you want to contact me, Scott at fireserviceleadership.com. And I'm a little bit of a procrastinator and very busy, but I'll get back to you eventually. I'm fortunate to be on a lot of podcasts and write a few articles, and so I do the third Wednesday Hump Day with Rick Lasky, Salka, and Curtis Burt. So I'm out there a little bit.
Awesome. Good. Yeah, I had Chief Lasky on, I don't know, a year or two ago, and that was a fun conversation. So
one of my true mentors.
Chief, thank you.
You bet, Jeremy.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. So thank you, Chief. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to sign off the podcast. Come right back to you, okay? Cool. Guys, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the National Fire Radio Podcast. What a freaking episode tonight with Chief Scott Thompson out of the colony in Texas. This guy is a motivator. He wants to push the envelope and make you fall in love with his job over and over again. He believes in his people, and he lets his firemen work. And on that, what do I say at the end of every single conversation we have is take this conversation, take it back to the firehouse and talk about it, because when we're talking about the job, we're making the job better. I'll see you at the next one. Jeremy, National Fire Radio.
National Fire Radio.